I know. I know.
For you.
We're done talking now. Yeah. We're done talking. You're dead to me.
Well, it's for work,
sounds
so
great, yeah.
I'll be sitting in a conference room staring at everybody
Looking
else
out the window,
outside.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like this.
Yeah, with a grumpy face.
All right, are we rolling? Excellent. And it is approximately 12:05 on Thursday, October 11th, 2018. I'll call to order the Assembly Capital Projects and Legislative Priorities Committee. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Yes, thank you. Ms. Major?
Here.
Mr. Gray?
Here.
Mr. Quist?
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. That brings us to item number 3 on our agenda, new business, resolution number 2018 TBD, a resolution identifying and supporting legislative priorities and capital projects. The sponsor is the Assembly Capital Projects and Legislative Priorities Committee. It's on page 2 of our document. And we can have discussion and motions here in a moment, but just for some context here, this is our final meeting where we'll be, in all likelihood, approving this resolution in some form and then sending it to the Assembly for public comment, discussion, debate, potential amendment. So with that, I'm open for motions or discussion questions.
Well, I guess I'll just throw
Maybe before we go, does the staff have anything they'd like to add at this point? Not at this point. Okay. Mr. Gray?
So I just noticed that the only thing that's prioritized apparently is the major maintenance list of those first 5 items, because I thought that the discussion from our last meeting that the other things kind of fell in line after that, but maybe that was just our lack of prioritizing. I don't recall the conversation if anybody else does, because I thought we had said things that were in the list upwards of 6, 7, 8, 9. I mean, I couldn't remember though. Well, I mean, there's the list in the draft, but now they have numbers up to 5, and then the remainder's not prioritized as far as I understand it. So, is that what everyone else remembers, or?
Yes, I mean, my memory was yours. Like we had numbered them all, but
I believe that. Oh, I'm sorry.
no, that's all right. I was just going to say, if we are going to keep it here, maybe we would consider noting that these aren't in order.
Yeah.
Ms. Major?
I thought that we had talked about it. I do recall talking about number 6.
I thought the rest just kind of fell in
yeah.
line, but yeah, I guess we could go through those. Should be. Okay. That's all, just clarifying.
And then we don't have to limit ourselves just to the text of the resolution, but any of this document as well.
So, are you asking that we put them in priority order? Is that what your comment was? I mean, is that where you were headed with that comment?
I guess that was, next in the discussion is, since those aren't numbered, perhaps we should look at where they fall, and is that appropriate? It's difficult sometimes because they're all priorities.
So if I may, they seem to be actually in a pretty decent order. I can hold my thoughts if somebody has something else at the moment. But so we have some accessibility and code compliance. Also regarding public safety. The third item is a heavily used facility. This item has a return on investment of somewhere like my understanding is about like 7 years, which isn't bad. And then after that, I mean, these are LEDs, they'll probably last like 20 or 30.
Right.
So, and then the last one being what we also heard at our finance committee meeting, being kind of one of like the more controversial ones too. So, I mean, this makes sense to me. I would be open to changing it. I would also be open to saying not in order and alphabetizing them or something like that. But just my 2 cents.
So,
Ms. Major.
I'd like to make a recommendation that we put them in priority order in the manner in which they're listed. Just carry 6 through 14 down. Just because I believe that's how the assembly saw it, and I think the assembly would be prepared to perhaps reorder as they see fit, knowing that.
Would you like to make that motion?
Yes, I'm sorry. I thought I'd like to make a motion that we just carry the priority order after number 5, 6 through 14 in the order in which they're listed.
All right, do I have a second? Okay, so it's been moved by Ms. Major to number the items in the order that they're listed, 6 through 14. Been seconded by Mr. Gray. Discussion, debate. Ms. Major?
So I can't recall all of the discussion from the finance committee meeting. Was it last week already? Regarding priority order. Okay. Sorry, I'm not acquainted yet. Yeah, so I thought there was maybe some discussion of like some reordering, and it doesn't look like we actually did that. But I do know that there was some discussion about the priority order. I knew and what they were potentially going to look like, and so I'm in favor of keeping the list as it is, and then opening it back up to the assembly for any proposed reorders as the total assembly would see fit. Recognizing that the top 5 projects are I think of most importance to the borough at this point in time. Anyways.
I concur. I'm comfortable with that.
All right, I think we're ready to vote. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Yes, thank you. Ms. Major?
Yes.
Mr. Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Quist?
Yes. 3-0. Would anybody like to change their vote? It is amended, and now we are back to our document as amended.
Okay, so can I ask a question
Yes,
for
Ms. Richard.
clarification? I'm sorry, thank you. So, item 3B, so do we need to come to a concurrence on the resolution before we discuss 3B, or?
No, I don't think so.
So if I could try to answer that question, we have a few options. One, we could table this now, go to that, come back to this. Alternatively, we could, so this is also addressed in a way in the document that's before us right now, on the very last page. So we could have a conversation about it now, and depending on how that goes, then that also would inform B when we get to it. But go ahead, Ms. Major.
I'd like to make a motion that we table further discussion on the resolution in order to discuss item 3B and then go back to the main resolution.
Okay, so it's so moved. Was a second?
Okay, second.
Okay, and I think we can probably just have a vote, or does anybody object? Okay, so it's tabled. We're on 3B, discussion to establish a method by which the state of Alaska can dispense PFD checks on a monthly or installment basis. All right, we're open for discussion or motions. Ms. Major?
So, I mean, you've heard me talk about this before. So my concern with this, as it currently stands, is I don't know what policy problem or policy issue we're trying to solve at this exact point, and I don't believe that we have enough information available to us today, or would have enough information available to us at the time that this would go before the Assembly, that would allow us to give the state legislature good information, good discussion that they can then launch from. I would like to see us keep this as a topic for next year and spend the time to develop whatever that policy issue might be, get a better understanding of the problem, the issue, and then bring some proposed solutions forward to the legislature in a way that they can use it. Right now, I feel like we're just kind of throwing a problem on their lap, and I don't think that it's necessarily rises to the same level of priority of some of the other bigger issues that we have facing our community.
Any other discussion, debate, questions? And we do have, Ms. Dolan?
I just want to, by way of information, we did find a bill from last year that Representative Eastman introduced in February, and then it never went anywhere. But it just was a simple change that essentially required the department to adopt regulations to allow people to receive their dividend in monthly installments. So it would have occurred more on a regulatory level than it would actually on the legislative level. So the proposed legislation from last year anyway is just a simple give them authority and have them adopt regulations to implement it.
Mr. Gray?
So you're saying it's more of like a code change at the state level, or is that?
So it would require state law change, and then what they would do is have the department that administers PFDs adopt regulations and have a process for which you could get monthly.
So it's not even in
installments.
like administrative code or statute or
doesn't,
anything,
no.
it's just regulatory at the department
It would end
level?
up being an administrative code change.
Got it.
If the bill were to pass and it became state law, then the department would then adopt regulations, and we could chime in at the regulations, meaning administrative code.
What was the
And there'd
bill?
be a public comment period for changes to the administrative code.
Okay, Ms. Major?
Yes, I was just going to say, so I mean, so at this point, what we could do is we could change this resolution to say that we support this bill if it were to be brought back up again, or be brought back before the state legislature, right? Or was it a Senate bill or a House bill?
House.
What's
bill.
the number?
361.
Page 361.
Clerk, will you please remind us our motion or where we are at the moment?
You have tabled further discussion on the resolution until after discussing item 3B. That is without objection.
And then we've begun discussion of 3B, but we have no motion.
Correct.
Okay.
And yeah, so I was just, like, we could potentially change this to just say that we support House Bill 361 as presented by Representative Eastman.
Right. So we're typically not that specific because
okay.
House Bill 361 probably won't be House Bill 361
Right,
in this
right.
upcoming session. So typically what you would do is just put the subject matter.
Sure.
But yeah, you could in your backup guidance just have an indication that it would be legislation similar to or something like
right.
that.
To
Right.
HB 361.
Yeah.
Right, or Senator Eastman's
Yeah.
proposed bill. What I like about that better is it's something that we can actually point the state legislature to, or whoever we're talking to, whoever's getting this, we can point them to something that's already got some background to it. I would assume that there's probably already been some policy discussion centered around this, and so therefore we're not having to create something more, but it still, I think, gets after the intent that you had brought forward to this committee. My arms are sore.
Mr. Gray?
I'll just go ahead and say I actually support that idea. I did not realize there was a House bill that had been abandoned, but at least some legwork has been done here. It looks like after reading through this, it kind of discusses maybe some of the need for this, and it's so I think I would support a motion to change language supporting legislation similar to this bill be pursued. It might just make it easier.
Ms. Dolan, do you have, if we were to consider an amendment along the lines of Mr. Gray's suggestion just now, what would that language look like if we didn't want to reference the bill?
I think you'd keep your resolution as is, but then under, to your description of the PFD payment disbursement, right now, talks about the public assistance challenge, which I think we determined isn't a challenge. And so you could just change this to say, support authorization by the legislature to the department to develop administrative code regulations for monthly disbursements of PFD or something along those lines, something just generic like that.
And then how can we be sure that do we want to, so there's one sentence here that's very specific, that it's also similar to the language that we have here, adopt regulations under AS 4462 Administrative Procedure Act that establish procedures to allow a person to receive a permanent fund dividend in monthly installments. I mean, does that
You could just do
capture
that,
it?
Just saying adopt that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not trying to, make your motions for you. I'm
No,
just trying to
either way.
try to get some language that works for everybody. That isn't, because I hear a concern that this is, I think that if we're specific enough, it addresses a lot of the concerns that Ms. Major has too, so. But I would entertain a motion.
Go for it. I thought you had more eloquent. I thought you
The last
had
sentence
some
is pretty much
eloquent
it. Between the last
solution.
sentence there
So
and this.
I guess I would move to. I mean, it's basically striking our statement that we have currently under here and replacing it with that we would support adopting regulations under AS 44.62 Administrative Procedure Act that establish procedures to allow a person to receive a permanent fund dividend in monthly installments.
So, and just a quick point of order, I'm sorry.
Sure.
So what we actually, I think we've maybe had a thorough discussion here on 3B, and maybe we can conclude this item and return to our resolution and make an amendment at that point. Does that seem appropriate?
Sure, that's fine.
Okay.
I'll withdraw
So-
my motion.
Okay, and then you just hold that thought?
Yeah, sure.
And now we're returned to, we're between B and C, but maybe somebody would like to make a motion.
I'd like to make a motion that we conclude discussion on item 3B and return to item 3A.
And we'll say with second by Mr. Gray, and I don't see any
Second.
objection. So we are now back to discussion of the resolution as previously amended. Mr. Gray?
Sure. I would now like to move, amending completely our item PFD payment disbursement and replacing the verbiage under that heading with support adoption of regulations under AS 44.62 Administrative Procedure Act that establish procedures to allow a person to receive a permanent fund dividend in monthly installments.
It's been moved. Do we have a second?
Second.
It's been seconded by Ms. Major. We did have a robust discussion previously, but do we have any more discussion at the moment?
No,
Ms. Major?
I would just like to add that we include in the guidance to the next legislative liaison group maybe a copy of Senator Eastman's bill or just something that kind of says, hey, this is the bill that we were referencing.
Mr. Gray?
Is there any harm in parenthetically referencing this bill and saying similar to?
I think that's fine.
So I'd like to amend the amendment to include parentheses that reference House Bill number 361, introduced 2/21/18 by Representative Eastman.
we have a second?
Second.
So it's been moved by Ms. Major and seconded by Mr. Gray to add parenthetically reference to HB 361 introduced to 2118 by Representative Eastman. And seconded by Mr. Gray, and discussion. We call.
I just think it's helpful to, that way we don't have to bring that up to the next group or whoever's on said group. At least it's there. And it can be looked up at anyone's convenience.
And there can be discussion to also
Yep.
see the back work, or the work that went into
Yep.
drafting that bill, or developing that bill.
Okay.
Vote?
Yes, clerk, will you please call the roll?
All right, on the amendment to the amendment. To include...
And actually, if I could, I would rule that this carries the main motion.
Yep.
Okay. Mr. Gray.
Yes.
Ms. Major.
Yes.
Mr. Twist.
Yes.
3-0.
3-0. Anybody like to change their vote? It's adopted. 3-0. All right, so we are now back to our resolution and packet as amended. Further discussion? Yes.
Just point out that the resolution is currently missing the 6 school district capital projects.
Okay, so do you have anything else, Mr. Sloan or Mr. Gray?
It's in the draft, it's not in the resolution.
Yep.
No.
District facilities.
So,
I'd like to amend the resolution to include the 6 school district facilities in the following order. Number 1, Barnett Magnet School renovation, Phase 4, Crawford Elementary. Roof replacement. Number 2, Anderson Elementary roof replacement. Number 3, Arctic Light Elementary roof replacement. Number 4, Arctic Light Elementary lighting energy efficiency upgrades. Number 5, and district-wide emergency electrical system upgrades. Number 6.
all right, it's been moved by Ms. Major, and then, just point of clarification, to add those at what point in this document?
And I guess to add those after the major maintenance, energy efficiency improvement, and capital improvements list.
So,
After line 57,
All right.
line 58.
So it's been moved by Ms. Major to add on, after line 57, on line 58, the school facilities as she just read. Do we have a second
Second.
discussion? Ms. Major?
So I ordered them in that way only because that's how they were listed on the draft. I am not married to that list at all. If somebody wants to make a change, I just wanted to put something out there for discussion. I can't recall the discussion from last week well enough to know where the assembly was at in some of those projects.
Mr. Grady?
No, I think that's fine for this discussion for now. I know there was some agreement or disagreement on where Barnett should fall, but I think that placing it right up there front, the school board has made it clear time and time again, as it's listed here, that that's their priority, but I think we can leave that for a wider assembly discussion. I'm comfortable with that.
Mr. Sloan, do you have anything to add? So it's my recollection that this order is what the district preferred.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, definitely, they've been very clear that Barnett's their #1 priority, and then these roof replacements all make. I mean, they're leaking and replacing roofs protects what we already have. I think they made that clear, and then. I guess the only thing that kind of, and I think this is my recollection, but I mean, I'm a little surprised by number 5 because that was something that they previously had much higher and kind of moved down, I think just because of Barnett. So we have a motion to add these in the order that they are, and they'll be numbered 1 through 6 then, presumably.
Presumably.
And any more discussion,
Well,
Mr. Gray?
when you mentioned number 5, you meant the electrical system upgrades as it's listed now? Is that what you meant?
Yes.
That was moved.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
no, I
future
agree. That
number
was, yeah,
6.
that was right.
So,
Yeah, that was- Okay.
so we have the motion to add this to the text of the resolution on line 58. Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you. Ms. Major?
Yes.
Mr. Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Quist?
Yes.
3-0.
All right, anybody like to change their vote? Seeing none, is adopted 3-0. We're back to the resolution as amended. So, Ms. Owen.
I was just going to remind you that at Finance Committee, there was an 8-0 motion to add ESP funding into that enhanced exchange program. I don't know if you want to consider that or not.
So, before we go any further, though, I would like to point out, I don't know if this is, how much of an issue this is, but in the backup of our text, now that we've numbered all the school facilities and put them in the resolution, they no longer match, and they're still in the same order, but one's not, it's Barnett and then 1 through 5. So, maybe we would have a kind of a housekeeping motion if somebody was interested in doing that.
So you don't normally actually do that, so that would get updated before the packet goes
Okay.
to the full assembly, but
Okay.
you don't actually make decisions necessarily on that backup.
Okay.
It's the resolution, but either
Sure,
way, you
okay.
so I don't think you need to do it. I think there's enough here that we
We
can
have-
order it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'd
Ms.
like-
Major.
I'd like to make a motion that in our, so I guess maybe this might be a question for procedure. So how we would add the electrostatic particular language to the enhanced home meeting exchange program. I know it doesn't necessarily need to be on the resolution. It, itself, right? But I would like to add it to the information that is presented, but I don't know what. And I think especially in light of current situation, I think it's really important to encourage the state and get the state to look at that. I just don't know what that language how that language would read or what that would look like. So unless it's can we change this draft? I mean, that's really what we're talking about, right?
So I guess I have a question, and this is kind of along the lines of what you were just addressing, Ms. Dolan. I mean, it sounds like the language that we want to insert here is less in the resolution and more in the backup. Is that something that's appropriate for us to address?
You could do
here?
it, I guess you could do it that way. It's not really part of the appliance exchange program. It's really an additional funding recommendation. So I guess you could do it you could either just add a bullet with ESP funding, or you could just make the title more generic and clarify the backup. I think either way works.
Mr. Gray?
Well, I was just going to say, I agree with Ms. Dolan's first take that maybe it might need to be its own bullet because everything talks about a device exchange. I mean, it's as opposed to a complete rewrite of that. It might be easier to add if we want to continue the change-out program, I mean, which I think some are interested in.
We need the state now to essentially.
So I just am wondering if it would be easier to add a bullet point for ESPs by themselves.
What would that look like?
I don't know.
Yeah, I know, right? So if
Ms. Major?
can we do some free flow discussion,
Sure.
if that's okay? Just to try to brainstorm. Is that maybe some sort of is it I guess is it asking ADEC to get support for ESPs, to get ESPs recognized by the EPA, or is it for recognition by ADEC that electrostatic precipitators reducing PM 2.5 and providing additional funds or encouraging state funding for ESPs in critical non-attainment areas. I'm just trying to think through how this is what you hate brainstorming on the fly like this, because it can get dangerous, but.
Mr. Gray?
I think it was partly both. That was the discussion, if I remember correctly. And I think the wording that was being used, if I'm correct, was retrofit devices.
Yeah.
In order to capture the things we might not know about.
Yeah, so
Up to and
retrofit-
including ESPs.
Retrofit control device
Yes.
is the blanket term that
Yeah.
is anything that you add aftermarket or after combustion. I'm not sure if it can be included from the factory, but that reduces emissions. Ms. Dolan?
I was just going to make a suggestion. I think what you have really in front of you are funding requests, so my recommendation would be that first bullet, you make it enhanced home heating appliance exchange and retrofit control device programs. And just lump it in.
Second.
Okay, so I'd like to make a motion that we add, so to the first line under programmatic funding, which currently reads Enhanced Home Heating Appliance Exchange Program, that we change that, and so to read Enhanced Home Heating Appliance and Retrofit Control Device, or Home Appliance Exchange and Retrofit Control Device Program. Did I get that
Second,
right?
yeah.
So it's been seconded by Ms. Major to add on line 20, after the word exchange, retrofit control device program, retrofit control device, and it's been seconded by Mr. Gray. Discussion? Questions? So, Mr. Gray?
Well, just we need to come up with, we need to add it to the paragraph now, that's all.
I think we can do that. I think we, right, Jim?
So I have
We
a...
have
Is that, okay.
Yeah.
I have a question here. Is that sentence as it is, and retrofit control device program, is that sufficient, or would I guess it is. Okay, I mean, I'm thinking out loud myself. The discussion.
I guess I would just, in the wording under the title itself, I would urge, or, that it be made clear that that is up to and including electrostatic precipitators, because that's been discussed so much.
Yeah, so maybe something, retrofit control devices.
As an example, yeah.
Such as
Right.
electrostatic precipitators can be included
Right.
in the backup material. So we have the amendment to modify the resolution on line 20, and we suggested some language to the administration as well. Any other discussion? Clerk, please call the roll.
Okay, on the motion to add to the first line, to read Enhanced Home Heating Appliance Exchange and Retrofit Control Device Program, Ms. Major?
Yes.
Mr. Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Quist?
Yes.
3-0.
Anybody to change their vote? It's adopted 3-0. That brings us back to item 3A, Resolution 2018 PBD as amended. Other discussion?
Yeah, just one
Mr. Gray?
quick thing. So the second item, full or increased funding for ADC or Quality Division. I guess, are there any implications there now that this Proposition 4 is passed, or is that completely?
Ms. Major?
I guess I would feel like, is that even more important now in light?
I mean, I guess I would think so, yes, but I just didn't know if there were any unintended consequences that we need to.
I don't think so.
Add
You're
or
not doing any
delete.
regulation or
Yeah.
anything. It's just, I think you're okay.
Right.
It's
So,
just putting the
so it is a
program
priority,
back to
obviously.
state, yeah.
Right. Okay, just making sure there wasn't
Yeah, I think
anything
you're okay.
in the background there that could be problematic. We'll talk more about that later.
Yeah.
Any other discussion, amendments? Just maybe while everybody's thinking, we'll note that even though, and the Finance Committee did not none of these motions passed, they did recommend, there were motions to recommend the removal of the borough office building, land acquisition. There was a motion that failed to remove the replacement aquatic center, and a motion that failed to remove the emergency operations warm storage facility. I don't, just food for thought. I thought it would, even though, and we didn't, you know, and I think everybody was there for the conversation, so. Okay. And then so we did discuss the PFD, the monthly program. I mean, it seemed like we had consensus on that, but the assembly did pass a motion to recommend removal of it. And I'm just mentioning that because it did pass, and so it's worth mentioning, I think. Ms. Major.
So I was the one, obviously, I was the assembly member who brought that forward, and that was, I think, based on two things. Number one, the fact that it had come up sort of in reference to the SNAP program, and we learned that there was no impact. Number two, because there needed to be what I believed was more work done on the policy front to understand the policy problem and program. And I think, that if we could get copies of the proposed House bill by Senator Eastman in the packets that go forward to the Assembly, that may help everyone else also understand that there has been some work done, and this will allow them, I think this will allow the Assembly to be able to have a more thorough discussion on whether or not to keep that as a priority.
Thank you. Mr. Gray? Okay.
In a nutshell.
And that was my understanding as well, but thank you for
that's
putting that on
good.
the record, too.
Good.
I think that... okay, any other questions, discussion here? Ms. Dolan?
Mr. Sloan just noticed it's just a typographical error under legislative. It says sales capital budget. It should actually say state capital budget. I don't think you need to make a motion. I think we just need to know that we need to correct the error.
It's just a draft.
So,
Yeah.
all right, so on line 35, we'll correct the typo and sales to state. Thank you.
And then one other kind of clarification. Under legislative, did you want to indicate these aren't ranked, or were those intended to be ranked?
My understanding was that these weren't in any priority, and if that's the case, then Ms. Major.
No, I was going to say that would be my understanding as well, because I think in most cases we're just providing support for those, and I think so where the other two are the programmatic funding, or I guess the programmatic funding isn't ranked as well. But from my perspective, the major maintenance, energy efficiency, the capital improvement projects for both the borough and the school district, I think are important to be ranked to make sure that the state understands our priority, if we're lucky, one, or either of our priority ones would potentially get funded. But I think it's more important in those cases where there's a threshold that we provide a cut line or a priority order.
Any other discussion, motions? I have a motion, I guess, if nobody's doing it here. I would move to add on line 25, after legislative, the phrase not ranked, and then to alphabetize the list on lines 27 through 36.
Second.
Okay, so it's been moved to add legislative on line 25 and alphabetize the list, and seconded by myself, seconded by Mr. Gray. Mr. Gray?
No, I don't see any problem with you know, listing these alphabetically. I don't think we're trying to show preference one over the other per se on these. I think that's okay. Because the programmatic funding one is alphabetized, if I'm not
It is.
mistaken. So
Yeah, and I mean,
this is consistent with
I mean,
that.
it is alphabetized. I don't know if that was deliberate, but it is alphabetized. Ms. Major.
That was I noted that as well, whether it was completely random or or whether it was by design. I recognized that it was alphabetized, and so I think being consistent in the not ranked and alphabetical order is fine. Just, just noting that there are people who will naturally still try to put whatever's first, they'll still try to prioritize it, even if it's in alphabetical order, but I'm fine with it.
Yeah, we might see people bringing more recommendations forward with the letter A.
That's
in
right.
the future.
There's a lot of P's, R's, and S's.
All right, so we have, the motion's been seconded. I think we're ready to vote. Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you. Mr. Gray?
Yes.
Ms. Major?
Yes.
Mr. Quist?
Yes.
3-0.
Anybody like to change their vote? No, it's adopted 3-0. And, okay, so we're now back to our resolution as amended. Any other discussion, motions, debate? All right, well, I think that we would like then maybe to vote on the resolution as amended. Clerk, please call the roll.
All right. Ms. Major?
Yes.
Mr. Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Quist?
Yes.
3-0.
All right. Anybody to change their vote? It's adopted 3-0. And that we already took care of 3B, so that scoots us along to item 3C, suggestions for future agenda topics. So I have one, maybe I'll just talk for a moment and then I'll have a motion. Maybe I went to Sustainability Summit yesterday, so the Norway Library was actually pretty well attended. And, a lot of the discussion is centered, or the Sustainability Commission is focusing on centered around food and food security. And there was a report recently that I haven't had the opportunity to read in full, but about food infrastructure in the interior, particularly regarding storage, processing, etc. And so anyways, all that being said, I think that it may be in the interest of this community and this committee to have a discussion on possible recommendations to the state for funding for infrastructure for food security. And I will maybe think of a way to put that in a motion if I almost didn't just now. So I guess I would move to add, or I guess we can just have a discussion and I can add to the agenda later too. I don't know. We can also have a this committee is kind of find itself in, to a certain extent, in my opinion. Ms. Major.
I was just going to ask, from an emergency management perspective, where does food security, food safety fall in terms of importance?
Very important. We
Yeah.
have no warehousing capabilities here now. Real time.
So, I recognize that at any given, like one bad earthquake could completely shut down everything, right? Like all
I've had an
ability.
earthquake in Long Beach or Seattle, which shut it, so.
Sure, or even one this side of just south of Salta on the Richardson, between here and Nenana on the park, shut the railroad, or bad enough. It could shut the airport down. It could shut the road system down. It could shut the rail system down. So, okay, I agree. I actually would love to hear more about what we could do from an emergency management perspective in terms of getting support, because we can be isolated very quickly.
Ms. Dolan?
I just want to say, just think about whether that fits within the scope of this committee or whether there's a different committee that would be more appropriate. I'm struggling a little bit with figuring
Well, I
out.
think in terms of maybe like capital projects, right? Whether it's a warehouse or something.
Well, so I mean, that's
else.
it. So the reason, and maybe it's not, the reason I feel that it is, or I think that it would be, is because, I mean, what, I think that the purpose of this discussion would be to draft a resolution that then we send to the Assembly, that we then send to the Interior Delegation, that, and to the Governor, or who, we send to our delegation and to our lobbyists, that says that we would like the state to adopt legislation to fund a capital project that addresses this need in our community, and the need is food infrastructure. So, I mean, it does, I mean, it seems like, is that making sense?
Yeah,
Or-
so it's a state request. That's, I think, what I was getting
Yeah,
at.
no, and I actually, I mean, if you don't mind, sorry.
Go ahead.
When you talk emergency management, right, the state has a really big role in that as well. And so I think that if there are things that can be done from a legislative priorities perspective, or, in addition to capital projects, I think it's important.
Well, and the idea is you ask them sooner so you don't have to ask them later
Right.
after you have a problem.
Or, yeah. Yeah, and you just look at what's going on in Florida, right?
Yeah.
And the amount of effort that is required across the state of Florida to just deal with those particular communities is really important.
So I would like to make a motion, if I didn't already, to add to a future, I mean, I'll work with you on the agenda in particular later in the date and everything, because we don't have anything currently calendared. But to move, to add to our next agenda, a discussion of a legislative request to fund food security infrastructure in the interior.
I'll second.
And seconded by Ms. Major. Thank you. Discussion? All right. Let's have a roll call, please, Clint.
Okay. Ms. Major?
Yes.
Mr. Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Quist?
Yes.
3-0.
Anybody like to change their vote? It's adopted, 3-0. Any other suggestion for future agenda topics? And then just as a reminder, I know it's kind of weird, but the reason that I suggested having this on our agenda is because if we want to talk about this, like if I want to talk with you, Andrew, or you, Angela, the only time we can do that is in this context, because we're
Correct, yeah.
so it's just kind of nice to get a chance to think out loud a little bit together. So
Agreed.
I don't have anything else at the moment. If anybody is pretty comfortable, I think we can adjourn at 12:51. Thank you.
Back to the office.
See you in a
so
few
I can
hours.
Get back here.
Are you the master?
So do I need to